All right, everybody, welcome to session 31 of Beers with Engineers. Super excited about it. It was just St. Patty's Day on Monday, so I'll give you three guesses as to which beer I'm going to drink, and the first two don't count. Um, really excited to have everybody here. As usual, we always have to start with the safe harbor notice. Sometimes we talk about things that have not been delivered yet or are still in development processes. And so don't make purchasing decisions, either software or stock purchasing decisions based on any forward-looking statements. But I think today we're really primarily talking about stuff that actually exists and is, implementable today. So we will continue on through that. So as usual, pretty formal agenda. You know, we always start with why are we here, who we are. There's a couple of quick updates for us today, and then we're going to dive right into the topic of the day. So we've got a great discussion. Super looking forward to it. So why are we here, right? So Will and I started this whole series a while back when we realized that there's not a lot of conversation around cloud native capabilities and how ServiceNow actually integrates in that space. And so we figured it would be good to build a community around that topic of conversation to not only educate, but also to enable customers to have a place, to have a voice and talk not only to the ServiceNow team, but also to each other. So we're very blessed with having an amazing group of customers that join us on such a regular basis. So who we are, my name's Mike Gallagher. I'm an ITOM pre-sale specialist. I am an old school nerd. I've been doing this a whole lot of time. And I always joke that if it has a one or a zero in it, I've probably managed it at some point in my career. I am big into solving business problems with technology and intelligently and efficiently. And that comes in a lot of different capabilities. Lately it's been, Kubernetes and automation and, cloud capabilities. But looking down the road, I'm sure there's going to be some Gen AI in that as well. So on a personal level, I am a huge board gaming nerd. I actually am super excited about session number 2 of Frosthaven this weekend, so very excited at that. I train a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I have 4 amazing children who fill not only my heart, but my hands and my calendar. And today I am going to be drinking a Guinness, right, in honor of St. Patty's Day. So Will, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everybody. Will Hallam. I'm a advisory solution consultant focusing on ITOM for ServiceNow. Been doing different technology things pretty much right after high school, 3+ decades. Right now, really just focusing on automating all aspects of IT operations management and seeing how that complements other pieces of the ServiceNow ecosystem. Really enjoying a lot of the cloud native stuff, similar to Mike. Kubernetes is a really cool, a cool construct, a great IT playground. In my personal time, I also really enjoy the company of my family and play a little pickup hockey and a bunch of video games. Today, I'll be enjoying a Paradox IPA from the Paradox Brewery in North Hudson, New York. And so today we have a special guest. Eric, would you like to do a brief intro?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Eric Schuman. I see some familiar names out there. I'm an ITAM SE. Been with ServiceNow for a couple of years now. Spent several years, about 4 years, working for a couple of implementation partners. And then prior to that, I spent 20 years in the corporate environment out of Omaha, Nebraska. So I worked for Mutual of Omaha Insurance for about 14 and a half years, and then First National Bank of Omaha for another 4.5. Prior to that, I was in the military, had 9 years in the Air Force. So all total, I've got about 34 years experience within IT. As far as passion, I'm a big outdoors type of person, so I spend a lot of time out in the field. But then also from an IT perspective, I'm super into into the ServiceNow ecosystem. Setting up. I see Mike Corey on here. We go way back. Do a lot with ITOM discovery and ITAM. So really enjoy just kind of playing with the technology. As far as beer, I didn't know we were supposed to wait and open them till after the introduction, so I've already started on mine. But Alex Upman, you will like this one. I am drinking Spotted Cow out of Wisconsin, so New Glarus Brewery out of Wisconsin. So it's one of my favorite breweries.
Nice. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got in the news and updates category, we've got just a brief update around our live Beers with Engineers event that's going to be at Knowledge 25. So we mentioned last month that we did get approval. The rest of the details were still TBD at that time. We now have nailed down the scheduling. So if you're coming to Knowledge, be sure and mark your calendar out, or block your calendar for 4 p.m. on the 7th. We're going to be at the Win in a room called Bandol 1. And as the slide indicates, we're still working through the exact topic and the registration process, but we did get our food and beverage order in on time. So there will be beverages and snacks for everyone in attendance. Okay, so today's topic is kind of a revisitation, because we have touched on this when it first came out, of container software inventory. So I'm going to kind of kick it off by just giving a brief overview with a few slides. Mike's going to share with us a blog article that he wrote on how to incorporate this capability into a containerized MID. So if you're using containerized MIDs, you will have to tweak your image recipe somewhat to give it the ability to perform this function. And then Eric's going to give us kind of okay, I've got all this data in my CMDB. What can Sam bring to the table in helping me to pull value out of that data? Just move my chat window over here so it's not blocking the slide. Okay, so container software inventory first was available in version 1.7.0 of the Discovery and Service Mapping Patterns Store app that came out in August of 2023. And then it's got some dependencies on the CMDB CI class models and the visibility content dependent store apps. So as far as delivery, that's what you're looking at in terms of what the plugins that you need on your instance. So what does it consist of? What does it do? It requires a MID server. It makes use of a third-party open source tool called Aqua Trivi, which is a best of breed container image scan utility. And what it does with that, it executes it via a discovery pattern. The discovery pattern runs on a schedule, as opposed it runs through a scheduled job, as opposed to being part of a discovery schedule. And it goes out and it enumerates the OS packages that are within a container image. So container images are, the recipe basically starts with some kind of a base image and then layers on additional products or tools on top of that. So anything that's in that image that was provisioned via standard OS package is going to show up when Trivi generates this kind of list of software. The pattern name is scan container image. By default, that runs every minute. And there's a couple properties that I'll show you when I kind of hop on the instance and just kind of show you what goes on with all the pieces, parts. And what happens is it bites off for every image that's in the CMDB that's not yet been scanned. It takes breaks them off in chunks and runs that pattern against that set of images. So the idea is to provide some throttling to if you discover a whole bunch of new images, it's not going to go out and immediately try and scan them all. So the table that it iterates on is CMDB CI Docker image, and the CIs in that table consist of containers, the images that are running on containers, either in a container runtime like Docker. So if you're discovering Docker hosts, not necessarily doing Kubernetes, it will pick those images up, and it will certainly pick up images that are discovered via any of the various methods for discovering Kubernetes clusters. The status of each image and whether it's been scanned, whether it's pending being scanned, or if it experienced some kind of an issue, an error when trying to scan, that'll show up in this pattern, this table here. ITOM pattern container image scan status. Say that 5 times fast. And then what it does with that information is it populates a few tables. It'll always populate this table here, which is delivered as part of the pattern store app, which is specifically just a big old table showing container image and OS package name. And then the other tables that it populates will depend on whether or not you have SAM on your platform. If you do not have software asset management on your platform, it populates a couple tables named CI Spickage, or short for software package, and software instance. If you do have SAM, Eric, is it SAM Pro and above, or is it any of the SAM variants?
SAM Pro, SAM Enterprise, and I'll even talk about the bad SAM and SAM Foundation. It'll populate the software install table in SAM Foundation.
Okay, so if you have any variant of SAM, it'll populate this table, which is CMDB SAM software install.
Yep.
It will work with a proxy server. So if your mid servers are using proxies to talk to your instance, we'll use that same proxy to talk to any of the internet facing container repositories that it needs to get to. It also works now, and this is a kind of a development that occurred after the initial release. It now works with authenticated repos, both private and public. So if you have internal corporate enterprise repos, it'll talk to those. It'll talk to authenticated or private, GitHub repos. We'll talk to Amazon ECR repos. The kind of the little nuance there is if you're talking to Amazon ECR, it has a slightly different setup, and I'm going to talk about that in just about a minute. So things to watch out for. So I mentioned it's slightly different if you have an Amazon hosted ECR repository. What it does in that case is it piggybacks off our existing AWS Discovery credential management, and it looks for a service account, an AWS service account in your instance that matches the account ID for that Amazon repository. And then it basically, whatever credentials or assume role process it would use to access that particular Amazon account, it basically just does that exact same thing. So if you've got, hard credentials configured, you just have to make sure that whatever account holds your ECR repos, that you've got a service account set up for that, and it references those credentials. If you've got set up with assume role, you just got to make sure that the assume role will function from that service account that with the same account ID that owns that ECR repo. And the nice thing is this mechanism works so well that I was actually able to use it to pull the AWS provided EKS packages. So if you run their Kubernetes as a service, that is going to use a bunch of images that they serve to themselves internally. You can actually enumerate those just by creating the appropriate service account. It does rely on, for anything it discovers, it relies on that being installed via a standard OS package for whatever type of OS is being was used to build that container image. So um, a gap kind of out of the gate that you'll have to figure out how to deal with is if you've got containers that contain custom software or internally developed container images that deploy software using like a zip archive or a tar archive and aren't doing, an RPM or an APT to install the bits into the container. Ways you can approach that and bring that data in include taking advantage of Trivi's custom module functionality. You can actually write custom specs within Trivi to tell it to look in a certain directory for something and then generate output based on what it finds. That I would classify as kind of non-trivial because you've basically got to write little mini Go executables to do that. So the juice may or may not be worth the squeeze there, but that is a hook that's kind of available because we're just piggybacking on the native Trivi functionality. Probably the better approach would be to adopt a practice of just generating small, we used to call them tag packages in a previous previous professional life that I had, where we basically used a small internally built OS native package that essentially just created or contained metadata. And we use that. So like when we would install our custom software, we would just install this little tag package alongside it that said, hey, custom app version 532 is installed on this box. And we would use that using native OS inventory commands to determine and identify those custom pieces of software. So that's kind of what I found so far as I was looking at this capability and holding it up against the scenario where you've got what, if you're on a standard server, what you might use a file-based discovery tool to locate, which unfortunately, or, just kind of rules of the road with containers is there's no guarantee you can just remote into that and look for stuff on it like you can with a regular server. Okay, so now I'll just hop into an instance and just show the different pieces, parts that go into this this capability. Okay. So the first step, as I mentioned in the slides, you need a mid server that has the Aqua Trivi utility on it. And what we do in our docs is we just kind of send you directly to their official install instructions. And so it does require a Linux mid server. And depending on whatever the host OS is for that server, you can they give you instructions for either native package install or pulling the executable down. And then Mike's going to talk about how you can kind of adapt that to a container recipe if you're running containerized mids. And so I've got my mid server and can just demonstrate that I've got the Trivi utility installed on it. So I get a help screen, and then there's a pattern that's going to execute on a schedule, which is going to make use of that by just running that command on the mid server and then parsing the output. So now that I've got my utility installed, I just go to my mid server. So here's my mid server record. And I just make sure that it's got this capability associated with it, the scan container images capability.
And it's important to note that only a mid server that has that Trivi installed on it should have the scan container images capability, right? If you have other ones that you've just said all on the capabilities, that can obviously cause problems, right? It starts to send batches down to that mid server that doesn't actually have Trivi installed, and the pattern will fail.
Absolutely. Let me just take a quick pause, just see if there's any questions. Um, we don't really stand on ceremony at Beers with Engineers, so feel free. Everybody should be able to come off mute, and should feel empowered to do so at any time, or raise your hand or ask in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with.
So, Will, you said that the pattern that you were showing that comes installed with from what release? So is it already there, or is it like in a particular patterns release, or does
Well, I
it
would
come
say,
with
yeah, it came out in 2023. The version of the pattern store app that it started with was 1.7.0.
Oh, okay.
But it gets delivered with just, if you're keeping your discovery patterns up to date,
Right.
at this point, you're definitely going to have it in there. And it's called, it's just called scan container images.
Got it. To modify the Docker recipe to install Trivy on it, and then once that is there, enable the pattern and
Correct.
run it on the cluster that stores images.
Correct. So the way you actually enable it is via these system properties. So after you've got your mid server set up, once you have at least one mid server with Trivy on it and the scan container images capability added to it, you just look at these two properties. This one here is a true false, that out of the box is going to be false. This setting this to true is what causes that scheduled job to run every minute by default. Totally, obviously totally configurable, but that's how it comes out of the box. And then the default image batch size. So in other words, the size of the group time 10 by default, but that can be tuned based on what's applicable for your environment.
And then, is there a way you could override the that's a regular schedule that is there, so you could basically change the time repeat interval.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
So in terms of the kind of the special tables that are introduced, this is the first one, which shows a status of every image that was found and the scan attempt, and whether it was scanned or if there was an error. That's where it'll show up here. If I filter out the ones that are scanned, there's probably some with errors because this instance has some it's discovering our Crucible lab, which has some kind of licensed images that I don't have credentials to retrieve. So here's examples where it was unable to retrieve an image. I've also seen where if there's a specific tagged image from a public repo and they've retired that tag, that I'll get an error as well. But then you can kind of drill into, if you want to diagnose why something didn't come through, you can drill into the specific discovery results and then drill further into the pattern logs. Just like just like any other discovery.
Question there, Phil. So it's the regular software like anything else for on-prem and stuff. It's the format of the data and the attributes that are collected is going to be exactly the same, and then it'll create the models that doesn't exist, and all of that will kind of flow in through the regular K-tins, right?
That's correct, and Eric's going to go into more detail on that side of things as well.
Sounds good.
Let's see a couple questions in the chat. Do we know if Azure Repo Service support similar to ECR is on the roadmap? Let me make a note. The docs didn't call out Azure, the Azure repo, but it basically said anything that requires, and anything that's an authenticated repo, you basically just you create a credential, and part of what's in the credential is the name of the repo. So I'm pretty sure that you can pull stuff from Azure today. You just have to make sure that you've got basically kind of a Docker style credential. So that's either like a username password, or like Docker Hub uses username and personal access token to authenticate, as opposed to kind of the simple basic auth. But I'll make a note to run that down, maybe create a quick Azure repo and verify that.
And real quick, I was on mute. Sorry about that, Vishal. I'll show you here in a little bit where the discovered software actually does get placed in the software install table. And it'll have a different class, instead of like Linux server, Windows server, it'll have Docker container, so it's easily identifiable.
Got it. Thank you.
You bet.
So, and then, well, with what you said with that question, so technically it should work, I believe. Like, I agree with you because it's Kubernetes, similar architecture and whatnot. But then, does it work? If I think we'll have to try that, because we have more like on-prem repository. So we have to see if that works, and then obviously Azure one is something we'll have to try.
Yeah, I mean, the proof is the proof is in the actual seeing it work.
Yep.
Absolutely. In terms of, so AWS, like I said, the AWS is the only one that's kind of slightly different, and that's because they wanted to take advantage of the fact that AWS is kind of special in that if you have a mid server running in AWS, you can give it a role, and that role has permissions within the AWS ecosystem without having to store any credentials. And that's always been seen as kind of a best practice and a valuable capability. So I think they wanted to be able to take advantage of that with this and not require new credentials to get generated. So that's why with AWS, to retrieve images, you basically just have to make sure you have a cloud service account where this account ID matches the account ID that's in the URL for that AWS hosted container image. Whereas, so that's what this is here. I actually, when I first set this up, I was getting errors pulling the AWS provided container images for my EKS cluster. I just looked at what repo it was hitting, created a service account that tied back to that, and just pointed it at my regular discovery credentials, because those images are available for any AWS customer because they want you to use their EKS solution, right? So all I had to do was provide some AWS user information, and it immediately started letting me scan these. Whereas for anything else, you just create a credential of type container image repo, like this one I created for my private Docker Hub repo. And you just populate it with username, and then whatever token system that repo is using. GitHub uses something called a personal access token. And so I've got my repository name here, and then my Docker Hub username, and then my access token is stored encrypted here. And as soon as I did that, I was able to pull those private images. And so that approach is what you would use for kind of your internal stuff, as well as I'm pretty sure it'll probably work with basically anything you can do a Docker login to. You would just plug those credentials here as if you were feeding them to the Docker login command. And so the data will come into this table here, which is the ITOM specific container image to package lookup table. It's just kind of populated alongside the more standard CMDB tables. So I've got SAM installed on this instance. So this is the SAM software install table. And you can see this is like all the software that's discovered. If I want to see just my container software, I can filter for Docker container class of the installed on value. or the installed on attribute. And so here I see all of the software packages installed in all of the discovered container images. And so then one thing I kind of added on.
Well, quick question. Does it
Yeah,
have the image ID with it too, or is it tied? Is there a reference to the existing image?
there is.
Okay, cool. All right, continue.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
installed on, that's the Docker image. In the SAM
Got it.
table, it's the installed on ties back to the Docker image.
Yep, cool.
So then one thing I did just as an exercise was I created a small subflow that populates a table based on tying back. Basically, it follows my container images all the way back to the actual application service that's running this workload based on having a tag-based service map. So this is just kind of a quick illustration of what you can do. You can answer questions like, what packages is the bonus calculation dev environment using for its containers? And all I did was I just wrote a few loops that look at the CMDB rel CI table, which is where all the relationships in the CMDB are tracked. And yeah, so that's kind of soup to nuts, how all the nuts and bolts work. And so now, Mike, if you want to talk about what it takes to get your containerized mid able to run Trivy.
Yeah, and actually before that, there was a quick question in the Q&A. What's the procedure if you're using SG AWS or SG Azure? Do you have to have a separate schedule for the container software? So I think it would be easier to answer that verbally. So once the container image is in the CMDB, then the existing scheduled job will run and it'll pick that up in whatever it finds it in that batch, and then it'll send the commands down to the mid server to say, hey, these are the next 10 container images that you need to pull down and scan with Trivy, right? So the key thing is you don't need to create a separate schedule. You need to get the container image record into the CMDB via the whatever service graph connector that you're using. And then the mid server that has the capability to do the scanning will have to be able to access the image in that repository so that it can pull it down and then scan it locally, right? So that's kind of the process. So just really quickly, I'll just talk through the container image build because it's very short and sweet. If you go look at the docs, we point you at the docs for the Trivy install. The Trivy install is literally a one-line command that pulls down a shell script from Aqua Security to do the install. And when you're building the container image, you need to add that line into the container image build in the Docker file. And as part of the Docker build process, it'll actually pull that script down and run it inside of the engine and actually install the software. The caveat to that is that the very first step in the container scan images pattern is to use which to determine if Trivy is actually installed on the mid server. And because we're actually using a fairly pared down Linux base image for our mid server container image, it does not come with which installed on it by default. So in order to actually get it to work, you have to add the which package to be installed on the container image as well. So this is the blog article that I wrote up that kind of walks through the process. It's really short and sweet. It just tells you here's the two lines that you need to add into the Docker file in order to get it working. And then you run it and publish it and deploy it into your environment. The link to this blog article is included in the PowerPoint that we'll be sending out. So you can go read this at your leisure at any time in the future. And in addition to that, it's on the ServiceNow community. If you look for containerized MID server, you should be able to find it pretty quickly as well if you want to get to that before we send out the docs. It's a really pretty simple, straightforward process. The key thing to remember is that the container image scanning process is totally separate from the container discovery process, right? And so as we are talking about with various customers, right, when you're discovering your Kubernetes infrastructure, we highly recommend using cloud native operations in order to do that, right? Cloud native operations does not require a mid server to be installed inside of the Kubernetes cluster, right? And so therefore, CNO itself can't actually do this container image scan process, right? You need a mid server somewhere to do that. And so therefore my thought process was, hey, if you're going to do this, right, install CNO to discover the containers and keep them up to date, but then deploy a containerized mid server somewhere with the ability to do these container scans, and then you can kind of have the best of both worlds. So that was why I wrote this blog article. It was actually a lot more simple to do than I expected it would be. Therefore, the blog article is pretty short and sweet. So let me know if you have any questions. And I think it's a pretty powerful capability. So
Nice. Take another scan of the room for any questions before we go to the next topic. Looks like we're good. Again, feel free to raise your hand or shout out whenever. All right, Eric, show us what Sam can do with this data.
Awesome. Well, real quick, give me some reactions out there of how many, I know a few of you out there, but how many software asset managers do we have attending today? Trying to look. Oh, we got Amanda there, I see. Jim for sure. All right. Egbert, awesome. Okay. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Well, first and foremost, I want to explain to you a little bit about what happens with software asset management. And let me see, can I share? There we go. All right. Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Now we move this around so I can see things. So, all right. So first and foremost, we already talked about it. Software install table, right? That's where everything gets deposited, whether it's a computer, a server, in this case, a Docker container. And then that's going to automatically, based upon what it finds, evidence out there by publisher product version addition, it's going to start creating those discovery models. And I'm gonna show you as far as like the discovery model that we've brought in. And again, this is demo data that we're using, but that we bring in, it's going to come in and it's not going to be fully normalized. And for a SAM administrator, that means a lot on whether something is normalized or not. But then those discovery models are what ultimately ties back to our content library in order for us to, add certain things like, critical things like end of life, end of support, those life cycle dates to it. And then ultimately, even more important, that's what maps back to over on the far left of this diagram of your license, your entitlement. So when you enter in an entitlement with the part number, it's going to map over to that discoverable evidence. So it's really important for software asset managers to understand this. So what I'm going to do is you've already seen a little glimpse of this. This is the software install table. And for those that don't know, this is also the software asset workspace that we're in right here. If you go look under workspaces, software asset, and then the third icon down is basically, a lot of your administrative functions where that exists. So you've got a lot of the old, I won't say older, but a lot of the tables, right, that you're going to have access to. So At the very top here, you can see we've got our entitlements, we've got our software models, and I'm not going to go, this isn't a software asset management workshop, but I just want to explain that that's where your software installs, which I'm super happy because when we first introduced the workspaces, we neglected to put the software install link within the workspaces. You had to remember to type the table name because we also took it off the filter navigator at the same time. So I was like, we didn't think about that one, right?
Oh boy.
But we got the software install table now in the right place within the workspaces so that you can go find it, right? Because it's ITs all the time, and you software asset managers can chime in here too. Is that the overall view of software asset management, the license workbench is a great place to look to see if you've got publisher information coming in, got your product information. You can tell if you're in or out of compliance. But we spend a lot of time in these underlying tables, the software install table, the discovery model table, the software model table. We spend a lot of time in these tables trying to figure out what it is that we have out there. What's our inventory look like? And so real quick, what you can do here is under class, you can go in and you can say, you can go ahead and do actually you can do a contains or show matching, filter out, right? But you can also say, let's look at all of these here, and I want to get rid of them, and I just want to look for the Docker information, just like Will was showing you a little bit ago. I want to take it one step further, though, because with the Docker information, you are going to have a ton of stuff that comes in there, and I really want to start filtering out what is it I want to focus on. So I can go in here and I can say, you know what, I don't want none of these. I actually only want the licensable stuff, right? Because that's really what I'm going to, focus on first. Now, at the same time that you have this, there's also a report out there that you can use. I tend to like the table view a little bit more and going through and finding this stuff myself. But there is a report. If you go in, so on the second icon over here where you're going to find your publisher tiles, you're also going to have a little report out there that you can click on that says licensed software products deployed on containers. And you can click on that and it's going to show you, a very similar report. It's going to have at least some higher level stuff in there, like hosted on server, Kubernetes cluster, those types of things. But you can at least get to a very similar report, for the software installations, the software assets that have been found on those particular images and or containers. But here, I'm just going to go back, right? And one of the things I'm going to focus in on is, let's just say I want to look for anything that has SQL Server in the name of it. I can go ahead and type that SQL Server. And so this, because this is one of the more common licensable software titles that software asset software asset manager, really needs to concern themselves about, right? And you can see that we've got the display name, the publisher, the version, and it's built a discovery model on it. Now, hold that thought there real quick, right? Because this is a software install table. It's showing raw information. What I want to do is I want to go over and I want to start looking at another type of report. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this or not, but if we go in and look at let's go back in here and look at the main page of the software compliance report, we can drill down into our Microsoft products. And then we're going to have SQL Server that's over here on the left-hand side. Now you'll notice the more savvy software asset administrator will say, "Wow, you don't have any version and or edition out there really within your license within this report." And again, we're using demo data, but there's a reason that we don't have anything for SQL Server. And so when I drill into this, you're going to see over here unlicensed installs. And if I go into the installs requiring action, that's going to bring up this report. Now, I can't remember which release this. I think it was started in Vancouver. I'm not 100% sure of where we started giving you reports of why, because let me go back and show you this again. When it says installs requiring action, that normally means that it's not going to count towards your reconciliation results or more importantly, towards your compliance results. And you're going to need to figure out why. And so when we open this installs requiring actions up, we'll drill in here and we've got SQL Server, and this is the container image installed on for that particular item. And you can see that it has an install without software entitlement. And so we're starting to give you, which I'm super excited about, we're starting to give you a little bit of information about why this would not be contributing, to your reconciliation results. And you can see under here in the description, software installed on this device does not have a corresponding software model and an entitlement tied to it. So it's basically a component that we found out there, an install that we found out there, that because it doesn't have enough information, as far as to complete the discovery model, to tie to a software model, to potentially tie to an entitlement, it's not going to count towards your reconciliation, and we've got to fix that. So back on here, if we go back and look at it again, where's my tab? As you can see, I got a ton of tabs going on here. What I want to do is I actually want to go in and kind of find out what's going on with that particular software install. And so if I go back on this screen here where I had those software installs in the discovery model, there's my instance, there's my image. If I click on this discovery model, you can see the piece that I'm missing on this to make it normalized is the version information. Now, I chatted a little bit with our business unit on this, and depending upon how we're discovering that information, from the installed device itself, this is coming in as discovered version of 2019. And if it was a Windows server, or let's just even say a computer, that discovered version is going to come in a little bit differently. It's going to come in at 19.1. something, right? And then it's going to get matched up against our content library. It's going to complete the discovery model, and it's going to make it normalize, which then it's going to count towards the reconciliation of a SQL Server 2019 entitlement, right? So it didn't. And so this is where I would say that, from a container SAM perspective, your software asset managers are going to really need to watch out for the evidence that's coming in from the containers, because they're going to have to take some action on that for it to count properly. In this case, we would put, if we wanted to follow through with this, we could just put 2019 on that, hit the save button, and then it's going to be manually normalized because you have normalized that particular software install / discovery model, and then it's going to count towards that reconciliation. But the nice thing about it is all the stuff that Will and Mike were talking about a little bit earlier about using Trivy and pulling all of that container information in, by getting it into that software install table, then we can take action on it, and then we can start using that information to start seeing is our SQL server that's setting in this particular container / image, are we compliant with that or not? So very simple. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on the SAM side, but just wanted to kind of show you how all that ticks and ties together, and how that can be used, from a software asset management perspective. Any questions?
I think the most important thing is there a shareable version of that diagram that you showed?
I can share it in a PDF. I can. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And I don't know how Mike, again, and Will, this is the first time. I hope I get get invited again, maybe down the road. I'm not sure how you guys send that out, but I can definitely send it to you guys, and how you normally disseminate it. So.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, we will distribute that for sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's helped me tremendously within my, I moved into the ServiceNow ecosystem. It was around 2017, 2018, I think it was. And having a diagram like that really helps to kind of put the picture together of how tables are connected within our application. I use it all the time. So
very important. Other questions for Eric around the software asset management side of the process?
Oh, I see my good
Um,
friend Scott Halverson just posted something out there too. So
No. But Vishal, did you have a question?
yeah. So Eric, if there's a content library is missing a software model that's
mhm.
that's discovered first, right? How do we solve that issue so that normalizes properly?
So that let me think about that a little bit. So how it normalizes properly. Well, one thing you can do is you can open up I hate to say open up a case, right? But open up a case and definitely there's a section on there where you can address it to the content library. When you manually normalize, so if you go ahead and you manually normalize that discovery model, and you're familiar, sir, with the opt-in feature and functionality where you can opt in and send information up.
What do you mean opt-in? Basically, send it to the ServiceNow or update the content library?
No, there's a feature within Software Asset Management Pro and Enterprise where you can opt in and you can send that information up automatically to our content team.
Got it.
Whether you're
Got it.
creating a custom product, a custom part number, you've got, the manually normalized stuff. You can send that in, and then once the content curation team investigates it, then that's gonna come back in your normalization suggestions. Within there's a here, I'll just show you real quick. Let me bounce this back up.
So I think it's maybe more process to when a new model comes in, we tap it
Mhm.
at the procurement time, check the content library. If it's there, great. If it isn't there, then you basically utilize the process that you're talking about and then get
Yep.
it published in the content. And then, so any variations of it that's already discovered that should all normalize then when the
Yep,
content
you got
library
it.
has it.
You got it. Yeah. And I'd say that, when you go in and enter an entitlement and you don't have a part number, then like I said, you can create a custom part number. Most of the time, what I've seen on custom part numbers is we've got the information like the publisher, the product, the version. We'll have a lot of that already in our I just got one the other day that I got to work with the content curation team. I always use the snag. It seems like it always comes up is the product is Snagit. And one of my customers had a part number that was SN99G-24N, right? And we had SN99C, right, dash 24N. And the difference between the 99C and the 99G is the 99C is a commercial part number and the 99G is a government part number. That it was missing, that we were missing that in the content library. So in this case, they would go ahead and create a custom part number, but we still had the publisher product and version that would accompany that, which would have been TechSmith Snagit 2024, right? Because the 24 in the part number represents the version. And so we had all of that in the content library. We just didn't have that part number. So we didn't need to create a custom software model. All we had to do is create a custom part number. And then in doing that, and you're opting in, that would send that custom part number up to the content team for them to look at, and then would come back later as a suggestion basically that you could accept or reject.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Great question.
There's a question in the chat about what if there's a software pattern normalization that refers to all versions?
Yeah. So generally, what I see when it's an all is that you've got a system property set that is automatically creating software models for your discovery models. Amanda, can you answer if that's set or not?
Yes, so it is set
Yeah.
as, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So yes, it is set as all versions,
Yeah.
and the software entitlement is also set as all versions. Uh,
Yeah.
so
I
it,
don't like other software asset managers, please come off mute if you want to comment on this. I personally don't like that process of creating software models for all versions when you discover them. And because it does create that, any version, any edition type of thing. I like to treat my software models as approved software that's in the environment. So it's okay to, for it to, of course, the out of the box processes, software installs, create discovery models, and then you have to make sure they're normalized. But to take it to that next level on a software model, I really like to create that from the entitlements, and 98% of the time we're going to have a part number. You enter the part number, it is automatically mapped to a software model, which is then automatically through the DMAP mapped to the discovery models. And then I can use that software model. Because coming from a financial background, we were very critical about approved software in our environment, and that's where I would use that certified button on the software model to say yes, this has been approved for use in our environment. That any is going to, basically when it shows up in License Workbench, everything is going to be lumped up under that any. And I would much rather see, publisher, product, version, in that tree structure versus having a bunch of stuff that would go up under any. And I would ask if any other software asset managers on the call would disagree, because at the end of the day, asset management is really kind of like an art form, right? Of being able to answer for things. So if anybody else disagrees with that, please chime in. But I don't like using it that way, Amanda.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Let's see. Oh, just a comment in the Q&A. Egbert 100% agrees with you, Eric.
Ooh, okay, awesome. I like to hear that.
Validation. Okay, last call for on-topic questions. Going once, twice, sold. Okay, for everyone in YouTube land, thank you for joining us. I'm turning off our recording, and then we'll just kind of go to our wind up.